Welcome to Bunny's Designs. This is a live show with live peoples on, it's actually a sunny afternoon now. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I've got this is part 2, because part 1 was putting the colours out, my professional watercolours. And I've got 2 brushes that I'm using the biggest one, number 2, for putting the water on, because I've got this point, and the other one I'm using to actually dot the colour in, because I've masked everything off purple that I want to be really light, but I want some really nice rich almost woodland tones, so I've got to kind of, it will spread to where I want it, but then it will kind of might give some kind of nice areas now. Now I've got to kind of have a bit of consistency, so I'm going to put a little bit in there now. Now this is just a practice. This is a practice because obviously it's buckling and it's going to buckle, and I really want it flat, but next week next Thursday the live show will be all about using this technique, wet on wet. But the paper will be actually stretched on a canvas. Sorry, Alfie's having a wander. So the colours are on the other one. Now I've got some water on this. Now the beauty of this is it will only run while it's wet. But we do need a little bit of consistency here. Because backgrounds are backgrounds. So you're just going right to that pencil edge as near as you can and really wetting that. Now this is called the wet on wet technique because obviously I have wet this area. And I am now dropping in some colour. So I've got, and I think this was Hooker's green. I've forgotten which green this one is now. Now I do want it to become a bit lighter as it gets up there, which it will do, so that's quite nice. But then I like this dramatic kind of blue in here. Probably just not wet enough actually. And the idea is you don't want it to be mixed, you want it to be patchy, if that's the right word. And you should have a really nice effect. So again, you want some lighter areas then. There needs to be a little bit of continuity, but the idea is you have mixture. Now this is not going to dry flat because I didn't put it on a board, but this is how I want it to kind of be. So I'm going down this bit next, so we've got the back of that. Actually no, we haven't, so that's this is the next darkest bit. So real kind of puddles of water. And if you think you've got too much, you can dry the brush off. And always have an old tea towel or an old face flannels would be good. Some kind of toweling's always good, because it's good for soaking up water. So we want, oops, no, I've gone over that bit, so that will show on my mushroom if I don't get rid of it. So now I can go in with the green. Now it's a long time since I've done this, so again, it's not really set in stone, this is how you do it, but this is a practice. So part one was masking it off and drawing it out earlier. I kind of want that nice effect. And it's only going where the water's going, so it's gone over there. Now luckily I can get away with that, but if you go over anything with the water, that's where the colour will run. So we want to be here and then down there. And that's why I masked off. It was a bit of a pain to do. It took about an hour, I think, maybe, to mask off all the berries. But I wanted to do that so that I could go in with some gorgeous colour. Oops, apologies. The elf master is being his usual pesty self, so apologies. He has no idea what he's barking at, so again, I don't want it too perfect because it's supposed to be mixed colour, and it will buckle because, as I say, it's not. So I'm going to the bottom first, darker, and then I can use the paler colours to take it up. Probably won't do a sky on this one. So what I thought, I wasn't happy with my little mushrooms for my Inktober, so I thought what I'll do is do a drawing every day, but not posting it officially because I don't really like them yet. Then I thought, well, if I actually did them as a watercolour, they may actually look better as a drawing if I've actually seen them in colour, if that makes any sense. So that's why I'm doing this. And I'd forgotten how much fun it was. To do watercolour. And again, I want to keep a lot of that green if I can. But then we're going to have a bit of that darkness down here. And the idea of wet in wet is most of the work's done for you. Sometimes you've just got to tease it. But this is extremely wet, is this, so you know that's probably why. But you get some nice effects. So I want to now go up. So I don't think I'm going to add any more. Sorry. Honestly. Oh, Suzanne's asked that question. Have no idea what Frisket is. I would think the sound of it is the same. Anything that gives you a rubberized coating to mask off, it's a masking. You can get masking film. We used to have to draw around things and stick things down with paper. But we use cow gum. But I think that's banned now. I don't know why, but I think it is. So what I'm just going to go now is all the way around now. With my clean water. So I can get a really nice background. Sorry, Alfie's having his moment. So I need to kind of re-wet all that area. So we've, oh my goodness me, Alfie. So we've got some nice, and always remember that if you take your time or it's warm. Now this is buckling because it's not been stretched. So next week I'm going to show how to stretch watercolour and then it will not buckle. So I want to be a bit lighter now, don't I? So I don't want any of that darker blue in. I don't really want any of that darker blue. So you can do this two ways. You can use a lighter colour. Remember, 3 pots, 3 things, different water, dirty, slightly dirty, and pure white, pure clear. And then I'm going to put some of these yellows in. And they're obviously not going to stay yellow. They will. But what they will do is just lighten up any green that I put in there. I'm staying with the same green. So all this green should run so you get different effects. So when it's stretched, it behaves itself extremely well. So that's quite nice. So sometimes you can go from very dark to very pale. Or you can put a touch of that darkness in and have it almost like a warmth in the middle if you want, kind of thing. So I'm going to leave it to dry. So if we missed anything, I don't think so. We've got the stem of that one, the stem of that one. So wash the brush out and then in clean. So I'm doing quite well with that. Just really show 3 sections of water. Very dirty, then go in that one, last of all that one. That's the cleanest. Have to have clean water. So you can use and you can move it about. If you wanted to kind of move this about a bit, you could get it to move about a bit if you wanted to. And I've missed a bit there, so I just have to use a bit of. So as you can see, it's a little bit crinkled, and that's because it's not been set. It's not been stretched. But next week I'll show you how to stretch a canvas, and I'm going to do another mushroom in stretched. Let me just see if I can get knock one. Oh dear. So you can see all of it. So down here we've got our little mushrooms. So I'm going to put that on the lamp to dry. Now next week I will be using a heat gun. I think I do have a hairdryer, but I used a heat gun. So I've put in here, and I've got to be careful. I want to know that they're dry. And I've put a little bit of masking fluid. Now my masking fluid is purple. It's very old, and it's an Umbro, and it's for probably acrylic paints, not for watercolours. I think the watercolour one is pale blue and pale pink. So I sent this by Tracy for my birthday, which is a beautiful book, and it's on watercolour paper. So I think it's awesome. Thank you, Tracy. So the daisies, obviously the whites of the daisies, I will be masking off on that one. But this one I've just done her wings and the little mushrooms, because I think I'm going to do her in Hydrus, which is quite vivid colours. So I've been playing with my mushrooms just on watercolour paper, playing about with, this is extremely thick 300, and it's buckled, it's kinked because it wasn't flat. So it doesn't matter how thick it is, if you want to use it like a proper watercolour, you'll have to put it down on a pad, because once it starts to curl up, you can't use it really in a traditional way. So I just dabbed a little bit of water off to make clouds. I started off with a real pale one, and then I drew some mushrooms and started adding extra colours and extra layers. So while that other one's drying, I'm just going to do this, play with here. So I've got these 3 little toadstools to do here, so I am going to move to a smaller brush, I think. Can we get away with it? Let's have a look. We might do. I've used some yellow ochre, so just I've got that. You can't have any wet anywhere else because the colour will run, so whatever you do, that's where the run it's going to run. I've just put that on there. And then I can do that one, and I can do this one, but I can't do the middle one because the water will touch and it will just run. But you could do this and work somewhere else and then come back, so that's what I'm going to do with this one. So if you can see, those 2 are wet, the middle one's dry. And then, see, I've been using my yellow ochre just dotting that into there. Again, the other advantage of having it set down is it doesn't move because it's on a board. So I will do that next week so you can see how it's done, and then the one I work on next week will be already, because it takes a day to dry, so you can't do it and then think, oh, I want to do it now, because you have to do a bit of prep. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this brown to this side here, keep that highlight, and add some to this side at this side. So you can work wet on wet, or you can work wet into dry. You don't have to do this. I just kind of like how it goes. And then if you want a bit of a highlight, you think, oh, I've got too much, clean brush, dry it off as much as possible to a point, and then you just draw just inside the line, and it will take off the colour for you, just inside the line. And you can take some colour off if you want, or you can add a real contrasting dark colour if you want to. And it will only run where it's wet. So you can get some quite nice effects, and this is all just the background. Then you can work wet onto dry and put some really fine details on with your rigger. So this isn't the be all and end all. This is doing just the preliminaries to get kind of some colour down. And then I could do this one up here. You just have to either dry, or you have to either dry, or you have to use a heat gun or a hairdryer. Now I've always used a hairdryer, but I did buy a heat gun last year, so it may be an opportunity to start using it. So must keep in with the lines, because if I go out of the lines, the colour will go out the lines too. I think I might want a bit of a different colour on this one next, I think. And again, it's just a colour, it's just a tone to get rid of the blue, because I did actually use this one. So this is dry, so look at the difference. This is using it on dry paper. It's a lot stronger. This is using it on dry, so you can get quite a different effect. Oops. If you want to do it darker, you can do it again. You just must make sure you've got 3 or 4 pots of clean water. Just let me get rid of that. I can see what I'm doing. This was when I bought something from somebody. She gave me lots of these sets. I don't know where the bottom one is now. So they sent me, I have a box full of these. I've never used them, so I thought it's about time I used them. So even then I've used the, this is on 140, that was 140, that was 140, that was 300, and then this was 90. So the set came like this. Oopsie, the set came like this. And there is another one somewhere. There should be another one somewhere. Oh, there it is. This is the first one I was playing with. I did some watercolours. So it was a set of paper that somebody sent me of different colours, and she said she'd never used them, so she gave them to me, and I've just decided that it's about time I used them. So I can use the other side, but it was to show even the £300 one, which is quite thick. It's no good if you don't, it will still not be level. No, it really is kinked unless you actually put it down. So I decided to play on the opposite side, because I still wasn't thinking clever enough to go. So I should have done the back side, but I've got the back side to practice. I need to practice because I've not done this for a long time. So this is wet in wet, and I didn't leave a gap, so you can see. This one I didn't leave a gap. This one I left a gap, and this one I didn't leave a gap. So I've got green in the middle. So if you leave a tiny gap, tiny space, and not wet it, you get a natural horizon. But it was just a practice. Lost my mushrooms now. Oopsie. So I wanted to practice on that. But next week, I think I've got this from Cass Art. So next week, this is £140. I will be putting quite a few of these, probably 4, on. I was stretching them on canvas. So I'll already have 2 sketched out, but I will be showing you how to stretch a canvas, a stretch watercolour, so that it's all flat. And you can just work with it as wet as you want, and it's not going to move. This is a bit silly having it moving about, and it's curled up as well, so when you put a puddle down it'll run, whereas if you put a puddle down when it's flat it won't run. So there's lots of reasons to do that, but this is just a practice because I haven't played with watercolours for quite a long time. But I thought I'd get my professional ones out. So part 1 has got the professional colours out, and part 2 was sketching out this. And again, it's you see there's 1 or 2 puddles. It's not dry. This is dried nicely down here. So heat gun or hairdryer would dry that out, and I will be using one next week because we want to obviously be faster. As today is going, I'm using one and then moving it, then moving another one, and I'm working in kind of a step, so it's working quite well. So I now need to do, I'd like to do, and I've missed a bit there, look, you see I've missed a bit. I don't have a natural curve. So what I've got to do is I've got to re-wet it, because otherwise it'll look different. So you can get round things if you make a boo-boo. It just does not seem to be as curved as it should be. So all I've got to do is just this, and then it's all mended. Probably have to wet the whole area, I think. So we've got a bit of continuity, so it doesn't look like I'd missed a bit off. Even though I'd missed a bit off. But again, this is the practice. This is why I'm doing all these practice ones, so that by next week I should be able to be a bit better. So thanks for stopping by. Oh, hi Sue, welcome to Bunny's Designs. Anybody else popping in? So I don't know if anybody else knows the difference between frisket and masking fluid. I would guess they are the same. It's just the name, but I'm only guessing. Not used that, just masking fluid. But this purple one leaves a purple tint. I prefer white masking fluid, but I've seen a pale pink and a pale blue for oops, I keep doing that with that water pot. Just have a look. And although I've got my colours here, you want to make your washes in palettes, in wells. The colours should be in wells if you're going to use them very wet. This is because I'm using it fairly dry. So that needs to go up there to dry a bit more, but we can play with this other one because it's just a practice one, so we can play a bit more. We can start to think about a bit more detail. So if I put that here, just got to remember not to push it into there. So I would use a couple of medium size. This is a 2 and a 1. Sorry, a 2 and a 0. And again, I didn't buy these, but I think they're about £10 or £11 each. They're Isabey 6234 Petite Grace, France. And I've got this one which doesn't have anything on its handle, but you could use, this says ox, but you want hog hair. Or I think Suzanne says 50-50. If you get half man-made and half the other, you still get that nice squishy point. That's what you want, the point. So it's got to be able to move and hold colour. Completely opposite to using watercolours in a colour book. Watercolouring in a book is with riggers. It's different. But you still need a nice rigger so you can get some nice detail. So I've got 3 riggers. I've got my number 6, I think that's a number 5, and a number 3. And that's going to allow me to really get some detail into this. So if I just make this kind of, I kind of want to just do this. And again, if you want to put some colour in it, you can. It's always going to be dark under there anyway, because it's just going to be a lot darker. And then if you really wanted to have a fine brush liner, the one I use, you can either have a Pearl Master 55 10-0 or a Graduate Daler-Rowney liner, and again another finer for really tiny highlights, and you get a really fine point. So if you wanted to kind of put a bit of a shadow into here, but this is getting into more detail, so you don't get to this stage just yet. You've got a long way to go before you start putting your very darks in, but it's to give you an idea that this is what the brushes are for. So, and this is just a practice. So you can smooth things out, or you can have a definite shadow, but sometimes it's quite nice to kind of put some dark areas in. So you've really got some dark places there. Oh, Suzanne said hog hair is stiff. It's not hog hair, it's squirrel hair, isn't it, normal? Sorry, it's squirrel hair, I think. Hog hair is for, sorry, hog hair isn't for watercolour. Hog hair is for oils and acrylics for scrumbling or scrubbing for dry. But you use, this is, I think this is hog hair. Yeah, Artist Hog. This is hog hair. So this is a hog hair used for oils and acrylics. And what else have we got here? Let's just, I usually use thin synthetic, but there are 1 or 2. Again, they came out of this beautiful box. That's a Winsor Newton Galeria. I think that's student grade. I don't think that was there. It's squirrel hair, and there's something else hair. Wait a minute, I can't think what it's called. This one says ox, and that's quite soft. So it's a Winsor & Newton one. Again, that was in the box. I didn't buy that. They're quite expensive. So thank you, Suzanne. Yep, squirrel hair. I can't say squirrel hair. But these are man-made. These are the riggers that I use for watercolouring. Probably don't really want to buy watercolour pen, but having said that, of course, I've started to use them now. So this one's dried now, so I can do the middle one. So it's not quite as wet as I'd like it, that one. Again, just using the, it's a bit difficult because it's not flat, but I'll get some colour in there. So you do want it wet. You want a good, not saturated, but you want a good wet puddle, evenly coated. And if you touch the sides of anything else, that's what you'll get. So again, we wanted yellow ochre. With a touch of burnt sienna. We could probably just turn that red down as well a bit. And we can't really do much now, we've got to let that dry. I think the shadow will be on that side. So we can put a bit more colour here if we wanted. Keep adding to things. This is wet on dry now because we've got some softness. We now need to kind of start perhaps building colour up and putting more detail. Every layer is more detail. And if you don't like that, you can put it back in. Yeah, squirrel, sable or ox is soft and squishy. And we'll do that. But it holds water and then it releases it when it's touched. It's all to do with the shape of the brush. What else can we do in here? I can put the other one in, I suppose. Let's just have a play. Haven't done this for a long time. So when you've got kind of an all over bit, you can then start to put a bit of shadow in. So you just can drop, because it's still wet, I can drop this in. And of course it's going to be quite dark under there, so it depends on how dark and mysterious your mushrooms are going to be. And then we've got this crimson and this blue, so we can make quite a dark colour if we wanted to. Now I did lose some colour earlier, so I lost my little white dots earlier, so but you can kind of, for purple you can use dark blue, you don't have to make a dark purple. And of course there's nothing on the other one at all, so we can start. This is going to be as well, it's going to have dark shadows on it because it's, but a dark blue that's well watered down is going to tone that red down. Alfie. Oh. Sorry, Alfie Pants has been a bad puppy again. So where you can make this mushroom really light, you can make this one kind of dark and grungy. One thing you don't want to happen is them to mix, because if they start to mix, you're in trouble. So if one's wet, go play on somewhere else, because otherwise you'll end up with just a puddle of mess. And you can just keep building up and building up and building it up, and then eventually you get where you need the fine brush. The liner or the rigger, the very, very finer one there, the liner brush is thinner than a rigger. And you can start to put the really tiny details in. You can't do too much here because it will. And then you can start to put a bit of a shadow under there. So you can start to put quite a lot of detail on. I don't really want to be messing too much with this because it's just a play one, but this one. So now you're playing on dry, wet on dry, so this is where you get your hard lines, so you've got to be a little bit careful that you use the exact colour because you can't get away with anything now. But shadow wise you can use anything, so so we've got a bit of brown here. So if we put some French ultramarine to this brown, we're going to get a gorgeous grey, and that's my Payne's grey. It's a warm grey. Payne's grey is a warm grey, so that probably will go down quite nice next to dark purple. So I can show what that looks like. It's Payne's grey, and that's a nutty brown. Oopsie. A nutty brown and French ultramarine. But when you put them together, you get Payne's grey. Always better to make your own greys. So if you want blacks, you have red, blue, green or brown, whichever, just three colours. If you have slightly more red in it, you will have a warm black. If you have slightly more blue in it and it's a cold blue, you will have a cool brown, a dark black brown. If you have more brown in it, you're going to have kind of a browny black, which is almost, again, I don't normally buy, it's Van Dyke brown as well, which is a cold dark brown, but you can make that darker. So if you put green and red and blue into Van Dyke brown, you will get a really nice black. I think lamp black there's lamp black and I can never remember what there's charcoal black, lamp black. I think lamp black is a blue black. There's another one and I just can't think what it's called. There's lots of different blacks. And so there's lots of different greys, because with a black all you need to do is add water to dilute it to make a grey. But if you make a strong solution, I don't know if I can do it with that brush, I don't know the big brush. This is a mixing brush really. So if we have French ultramarine and oh, that's about right, that's Payne's grey. But if you look at Payne's grey diluted, it's quite nice, but if you look at it quite strong, you might say that's a black. Slightly more brown and it's a warm black. Slightly more blue and it's a cold black. It's a blue black. So we've got a brown black and a black, and then we've got a blue black. So if you've got a cloud and it's really dark and you want a black, you want a blue black. If you want bark and it's really dark, you want a brown black. And the Payne's grey normally takes on whatever colour you're using. But I like making my own browns normally, but there's warm browns and there's cold browns, which is why if you're going to have this set that I show in part 1, it has warms and warms and colds. This has got cold yellow, lemon yellow, it's got a cadmium yellow, which is a warm yellow, so cold yellow is lemon yellow, it's got an orange, it's got orangey red, it's got cadmiums, it's got a Elysian crimson, it's got a purple, purple blue, cobalt blue, what's that one called? That's cerulean blue, and then you've got, it says intense blue, but I would call that indigo. There is a green, there's 2 greens, there's a sap green and a viridian. Then we've got a raw sienna and a burnt sienna, a warm. Then we've got a burnt sienna, sorry that's not burnt sienna, that's raw sienna. Wait a minute, what's that one? That's a red light, so that one's like, this one is called, what's it called? Indian red. It's called brick red. So it's good for bricks, it's good for squirrels, it's that kind of really reddy red, a reddy brown. So it's good for squirrels, red bricks, some types of bark. It's very good for brown leaves, because obviously they don't normally go dark, they go this colour, the russet reds, any russet colours. It's a bit paler than this is a shadow. Then you've got your cadmium yellow, raw umber, and your burnt umber, so they're the dark ones. Lamp black, and there is a black in this set, so it's a really good set. Thank you, darling. So that's why I like that set. It's got some good colours. You've got warm and cold of each colour, which is always good. Oopsie. So this is, I would say this is dry now, even the bit I've just done. So give it a bit longer and then we can have another play with that. So you just then get to this stage and then you start to pick things off and have a look and mix colours. This is where your colour mixing then comes. You've done your flat colour, now you want your highlights, your lowlights, you want your mixtures. This is when this starts to become the exciting bit. This is the best bit, putting the final details on. You can't put any details on until you've got the flat colour down. So I can't start up here as detailed as I am down here because I've only got one wash on here. I've got probably 3 or 4 and I've got 3 or 4 tones. So some work and some don't. It depends on what kind of shadowing you want. I think I might start using this. This is the fake, I shouldn't call it fake, but not man-made, not natural. Artist Pearl Series 11. They're the ones that, in theory, pretend to be these. You twist them to a point at the end. So rather than spending £10–15 on one of these, you can spend a couple of pounds, £2 or £3 each of these. And again, you want about 3. You probably don't want any more than 3. I'd found a set that I must have bought at some point. So I have a 12, a 10, an 8 and a 6. And I think somewhere there is a 4 somewhere. So I must have bought it in this set here. And they're about a tenner, I think. £8 to £9. So these would be a couple of pounds each, or a tenner for a set of 5. But I would also include in that a couple of riggers and my Art Master Pearl 55 liner, or the Daler liner. These two, if you want to go into really detail. Now some watercolourists don't, they leave it like that, that's it. They just wish-wash it and leave it. Just put wet on wet and that's it. But I'm a bit of a, I like to put a bit more detail in, so I kind of take it a step further. So you can do them with cheaper brushes. You don't need the expensive brushes, but you know, if I wanted any more than this, I would probably ask them for Christmas. That's what I normally do. Having said that, I think I'm 5 birthdays and 6 Christmases ahead. But I always forget. I've got short-term memory loss, so that's fine. So again, this, you know, I could have done it on that side, but now I've got that side to do a better version of that. You know, it was a practice. It's a bit pants. The next time I do it, it's going to be slightly better. I'm going to be better at doing the wash. I'm going to be better at doing the shapes. I'm going to be better at remembering what colours I like together, because I've got them here. This is why I did this palette, because I wanted to use them. It's not very good for watercolour, really. It wants to be in here, but I didn't have enough wells. So if you want to, I mean, you could use a little pot, or you could use little dish, a saucer, a plate, anything with individual things, because you want to keep the colours separate. That's when you're doing your wash. This is when we start to kind of mix the colours together and then take them somewhere else. This is what we're taking somewhere else. So this is how it happens. This is where you get your finer detail. Suzanne says I'm not having anything for a long time. I don't have anything for watercolours. I need some new watercolours. No, I did buy the watercolours professional set to use in my colour books, but I've kind of started doing my own colours now, and I've got back into being an artist again. I took a long time after my degree. Sometimes when you think a degree is good for you, or a certain teacher is good, if you get a bad teacher, it has stopped me painting for 5 years. It's 5 years since I did my degree, and I couldn't even colour a colour book in a couple of years ago. So, and a lot of people have said they had to leave. Doing a degree in art is not easy, especially when you don't get very good teachers. It's not nice. So it's taken me a long time. But I finally started to paint again, which is spoiling my colour mixing for my colour books, because I now have a lot of colour books, and I really don't have any incentive to colour them. Yes, I love them, but now I want to do this. So it's a bit of a different, and people you will get that once you learn how to colour, and you can colour books the most perfectly way you want to. You will want to do something else. This is why I said to buy half a dozen professional colours. Use them in your colour books, because you are practising and using your real, true colours. And then when you start to kind of dabble in drawing your own things, you've already mastered the colouring section, which is a very big thing. You know, drawing or tracing a watercolour is what you do at a watercolour class is easy. The colour mixing and the colour is the difficult bit. Well, when you're colouring, that's what you learn first. So you will get to a point, if you do colouring books, where you don't want to do it anymore, but you love art, and you will then take it somewhere else. You might start to do a sketching journal, or playing with colours in a colour book, in watercolour paper, but not necessarily drawing anything. You might decide that you want to draw an apple because it's in front of you. Something will just spark something off, and you'll want to paint it. And you'll want to, even if you don't get the shape right, because you've been using your colours in your colour book, your colours will be right. And so you've only got to master your drawing skills. And drawing skills is just practice. And like colouring is, your first colour book is never going to look as good as your last colour book, because you've got better. And you can even see that in the front of the first colour page and your last colour page in one book. 3 or 4 down the line, you've ironed out a lot of your problems. You've learned quite a lot. So when you can open a book and just suddenly start to colour in it. But there will become a point where you do not want to colour somebody else's work, because you've learned every colour combination there is. You've learned every colour technique, whether it's brights, whether it's pales, whether it's watercolour, whether it's inks. So you've done all that. You've got all that colour work, all that information you've learnt and stored. So your brain will want to do something else. Your creativity will want to do something else. And it probably will want to draw some little stick mushrooms, and then you want to colour them. So you will eventually want to use any of your supplies in its true form, not just for a colour book. So that's why I always say, you know, if you really like the watercolour effect, buy just half a dozen watercolours. Now again, 3 or 4 of these colours were in this set that I bought from this gentleman that I found from eBay, and when the box came it was just full. Even the watercolour paper that I've used, that was in there. I think there was 1 page missing from about 5 or 6 huge watercolour books. Watercolour pads, I should say. They come in pads, and you can sometimes have to cut them out. They have one split end, and then you cut them from the rest of the pack because they're glued to stick together to stay nice. So there's always your art will be changing. Everything will be changing. You might start with Crayola crayons, and eventually you'll think, well, you know, I've done everything I can do. Now I want something else. So your colouring will evolve, but eventually you will get to a point where you'll start to do a few doodles in a journal. Might be a junk journal, might be a scrap journal, might be a colour journal, might be just a little book that takes a little bit of water and you can use your colours. But you will eventually want to do your own drawings because you can't help it. It's a creative process. Either people start with pencil and line and then they go to colour, but because we started with somebody else's drawings, we've gone straight to colour. Normally colour is the thing that you learn after you've learnt to draw, but we're doing it backwards. We've got all these books that we've coloured in all these colour combinations, all this colour information, whether we've mixed our colours or not. We know what colours we like, we know what colours go together, because we know what pages look good and what pages we don't like. Eventually you will want to draw, even if it's stick men, you will want to draw something yourself and colour it in. So there will be a point in everybody's creative step. The next step from colouring is doing a little bit of a doodle. And I've forgotten what I was going to do then. I totally forgotten what I was going to do. I had a big colour there. I did the greys, didn't I? So I've had a bit of a play with that, and again we've still got lots and lots of colour. That's the difference between professional watercolour and ordinary watercolours. The pigments are a lot stronger, so you need less. So it's not buckled too much, but it's not dead flat. So what I can do now is I could, very quickly because we've come to an hour, I could show you what this looks like. I'm not going to take the dots off here. Oh, I could actually I'll just do the red. Yes, I've got the red here, look. So if I look back at my practice, and it was a practice because it was on really, really rough. Do I like this colour? Do I like this colour? Or do I like this colour? I like the fact that they have kind of moved, and it's a very strange thing because I drew this with my first watercolours in, I think it was Imagimorphia, and it's one of the first pages I did. Oh, it was the first, oh sorry, I can't talk today. The first page I ever did with professional watercolours in a colour book was this one. And I've got my little dark mushrooms, and I got paler and paler and paler and paler. And this red is the same red as this, and this is exactly 50-50 alizarin crimson and cadmium red. And I find that to be the perfect combination for mushrooms. They're not too pink and they're not too red. And I love this combination. So it doesn't matter if it's watercolour, if it's oils or acrylics. I always mix 50-50. Alizarin crimson, which is a pinky red, and cadmium red, which is a cold, bright red. 50-50 I think makes the perfect toadstool colour. But adding water, if it's a watercolour, or adding white, if it's acrylic, oil, gouache, that makes it paler. And so you get very dark to paler to paler. So this is the same red as this. So again, I've learnt that's automatic, that my little mushrooms are dark and my paler mushrooms that are higher up have more daylight, so they look more washed out. And I kind of like that. And that was one of the first pages I did about a year ago. And I've made 501. Actually, I've made a couple today, but I've made 501 videos in just over a year. And this was one of the first ones I did in this Kerber Roxanne Imagimorphia. And yet here we are, a lot of colour pages later, and I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm doing the darker little mushrooms and the paler big ones. Now Disney or fantasy, they're all the same. But I always think that maybe the bigger ones, the higher up, they're not in shadow, they would be paler. But you can colour them however you want. That's just how I do it. So that said, what I had on my little board, cadmium red and alizarin crimson. Actually, I think that one's cadmium red. That one is crimson, and that's alizarin crimson. So maybe that's why that's a little bit pinky. So I'll just change that really quickly. And really, you should never have your palette on top of your, because it doesn't work. So over here we've got, I didn't use that big one, but I've used that one to wet the page when I went across. And I've used these, and then I've got my liners. Sorry, I've got my Thursday cough. I always have a Thursday cough. So, let's have a look. So I want alizarin crimson and cadmium. Oh, sorry about that. I just start to cough, and that's it. So let's have a quick look at this colour. I like this colour. That's nothing but just adding water. Just adding water. Oops, just adding water. Oh, excuse me. So, again, you can decide which one you want. How strong do we want it? I like that one, I think. sorry about that. I think it's because I've been chattering since 8 o'clock this morning, so I get like this on the last video that I do. So apologies. So we've got this red, so we can have a bit of a look, see. So I think I'm going to do, I think because I've got this watercolour effect, sorry, I'm going to do it as a watercolour. So if I go quiet, you know that I'm coughing. Sorry. I'm going to go back to these brushes. So I'm using the number 2 to wet and the number 1 to add the colour. So clean water, twisting it almost to a nice point. So we'll start with the tiny ones first. So it's always easiest to use that point where you want to go. So I need to turn that so that I can kind of so we need to kind of wet it, make sure that it stays really wet, because it won't work if it's not. Now we can't do this in our colour books, but that's wet, so I can really quickly get some of this colour and kind of drop it in to here. So we can either move it about a bit, or we can kind of give it a bit of strength down at the bottom here. And again, you've got to be a little bit careful. So this would be shadow. And maybe drop a little bit of this purple into there as well, I think. Really make that kind of dark. And then if we wanted to highlight, a clean brush and dry it, and then just kind of touch. You could either do it with a brush or you can do it so you've got like a natural highlight. And if you really wanted to take some off, just a damp brush, and that's called lifting, and you can get a really nice natural highlight by doing that. And then a little bit of French ultramarine to kind of darken that up a bit. So again, I'm just going to I can't do that because it's touching now. It might just be a bit wet, so what I've got to do is go to this one and again just touch it. You cannot work in the same place. So I was just laughing at Alfie. He's probably just sitting in front of hubby, just barking, doing his little yap. So again, you need to get it equal. So if you see that's wet, that one's dry. So again, you can drop the colour. We've still got the colour from last time. You can drop that in. Actually, I don't know which dog that is, so apologies. Can't shout at Alfie if it's not Alfie. I seem to have got a hair on that one. And if you're finding that you've got a line, you can kind of just soften it a bit. And remember, this is really, really good watercolour paper, so it will take this. Of course, a colour book will not. And drop of French ultramarine. We'll darken this up. Or purple, or whatever colour you want. So I have a purple. I can drop some purple in. And then I can take that very top off if I want. Is that a dry brush? That's going to give me a bit of a highlight just on top. So I've still got red paint on there, so I'm going to leave that because I do need that paint. So if I had a heat gun handy, I would dry that one and do the middle one. But I think we might get away with it actually, because it is basically the same colour at the bottom. If it was different, I wouldn't do this because it wouldn't work, but I can get away with it because it's the same colour. So again, and you'll see it run instantly, it touches. So if that was a different colour, you never work in the same place, but as I say, I can get away with it because and again, you can mix that. Drop some purple in. And then just lift a little bit off that top. So we can leave those to dry. I think they're a bit purplier than the red one. But again, this is a practice, so I can decide, do I like that one, do I like this one, or do I like this one? So you get where you can practice whichever one you like. Now, because I've got lights on, you could do all three, and then they would be more unified, but they'll dry very quickly, so I'm not going to do that. Whoopsie. And I do want a little bit of a difference between each one. So put that on there. So we'll put now, if it was very wet, you would get a bigger amount, but and then if you've made a bit of a boo-boo, this is where you can just kind of get it back a bit there. And again, if you want to just make a point of a highlight on this side. And you're not adding any white, you've just got a bit of a... just want to soften it a bit. Just add some more water. And it's drying very quickly because of the lights. Just need to put now you can actually pick it up and tilt it and do all sorts of things with it to make it run where you want. I don't normally do that, but you could do if you wanted. If you want it in a certain way, you can do that. Then everything's kind of natural. But eventually that will dry how you want it. We can just get that real. Ultramarine. Now, as I say, I'm just practicing, haven't done this for a while, so it's not going to be perfect. The best thing to do is to watch lots of videos on watercolour. Where's my brush? Right, so for my next brush, I can't do that one because I don't want it to smidge, so I've got to do this one. So I can do this one. Now I've got to be a bit careful because this green, it's a watercolour, it's going to react. Oops. Oh, for goodness sake, dogs, honestly. Just bear with me 2 seconds. We have a new watercolourist. Alfie wanted to do some watercolouring. Need to go down? Thank you. Alfie wanted to do some watercolouring. Oh gosh. He's saying we haven't had our Alfie fix today. Nobody loves me. I'm nobody's child. Alfie. So again, that's dried again. That's good. It doesn't take long for it to dry. So, you know, one area at a time. If you want to do it like this, and it's a bit buckled, is this? So, you know, the colours are going to run side by side. They're probably not going to go where I want them to. So again, that's another reason to stretch your canvas first. Oopsie. So I can then put my red. I mean, you could just dunk colour and then put it wherever it wants to go, but I kind of don't do that really. So that can kind of do its thing, and then we can take a bit of this off the top. So this depends on if you've got bright sunshine, if you've got shadows, all sorts of things. Yeah, I can just imagine Alfie with his feet in this. I've had to degunk the cat before today. That's a funny video. She jumped on it live. The little sausage. She did. She decided she wanted to be on the desk. So I think that might look quite nice. So you get kind of a bit of a natural highlight. So again, you really should make sure this one's dry and that one. So I think I'm going to do these. I can come back to do that one, and then that one will be dry, then that one will be dry, so we'll do this one next. Oops. So it's quite a wet brush, is that? And again, you need to stick to your lines. Now, the next one I do, I probably won't do it as dark, maybe, I don't know, or maybe do it as a pale watercolour. Really not any idea. Depends what the background looks like. Obviously you don't know what it's going to look like till you've taken that off. So it must be quite warm in here because it's drying really fast. I have a rogue hair. Oh, it's drying as fast as I'm doing. As fast as I'm doing it, it's drying. alizarin crimson. So you really have to stay in your lines now. You can't really be too slap. So I could possibly just let that just gently kind of flow into there. Just pick this off this bit. Oh, Alfie, no. The other way to do it is, if you want a really nice highlight, is the old-fashioned way. You can get quite a lot of colour off there, but obviously I don't think we want too much colour, so and again just want to get some of that like a burnt carmine colour. I always like that with the pastels, so if I could make that colour I'd be a happy girl. Sometimes if you play too much with it you kind of lose it, so you've got to sometimes just decide. Perhaps the nicest thing is sometimes it is a little bit forgiving. Thank you, darling. And shouldn't really mess about with it too much, but I kind of just want to take that back a little bit. Oopsie. I can always make it darker, so I can leave that. So the next one is I can come down here and do this one next. But I'll do this one next. Just try it. Oops, must have had some red on my fingers. Luckily it's okay. So sometimes you can let it run, but other times you just have to tease it to the edge. Oopsie. If you get some that you don't want, you've got to lift it straight away, really. Even if it means going back in again, that's fine. But you have to get that colour off. And you can always add this later, but you always get that just lovely mix if you do it at this stage. But we can darken it up. What we can't do is lighten it. So one thing we can't do I mean, the other thing with watercolours, of course, is they always dry lighter. That is a given. So that's another thing you've got to kind of get used to. Sometimes you can put a colour on and go, oh, that's a bit pale. But you can always go darker, but it's very, very difficult to get lighter. So I'm going to do this one next, and then that should give me, and you've got to be quite accurate with this. You've got to be fairly accurate, because wherever you put your water, that's where your colour will run. So there's different ways you can draw it down or draw it up or re-wet it. Excuse me. Or you can just kind of make sure that it definitely stays where you put it. But that's wet on wet. Now what we'll be doing with the more detail is we'll be doing wet on dry, which means just putting ordinary watercolour on it, because some edges want tidying up. And these are not as dark as the bottom ones. No, it's a bit dry there and dry there, so I'm going to risk it. And then I shall leave that to dry and go paint. I've got to do the pencils in the mushrooms. I'm going to do some pastel pencils in mushrooms. And then that will make this dry enough to take off. Leave that to dry. Let's have a look. First thing I've got to do is go clean my water now, because it's now got too yucky to use. So if you bear with me a second, I'll go do that, then I can leave that to dry. Right, so I might just do those next as well. So again, you know, you have to forgive me, I haven't done this for such a long time. I think we can go down here. It's a bit damp, but it should be just about okay. I think that one's yellow. of. So sometimes Sometimes you just got to put little bits of colour in. And let the water do the rest. And then sometimes you've got enough colour to just kind of stain it. Again, it's a pale colour. So thanks for stopping by, guys. Hope everybody's alright. Have a quick look at chat. Suzanne says paint me a picture. Alvin. He's certainly got the tail for it. He certainly has a fluffy tail. So he certainly could, Suzanne. Might be the next masterpiece. Wasn't it the monkey that did some paintings, and then there's an elephant that's done some paintings. Probably going to be better than mine, so. The trick is to remember, only go where it's dry. Unless you want to add a bit of colour, but. No, I've got a bit of. Oh, I can't go under there now, can I? No. That's still wet, so I could go there. Again, that's going to run, but I could do this one. Again, I'm going to put a lot of detail on this, so it's just getting this base coloured out. And this is just kind of trying to put things where things are and make sure we've got the composition okay. That's going to be quite dark under there, so wasn't really bothered about that, but it just gives them a little bit of something. It gives them a bit of something. Now that seems to be darker than that, so I'm going to have to just put I actually preferred the red, but just need to match those up a bit because they didn't really match up. Now again, this is what I meant about going over it, just giving it a bit of oomph. They look a little bit better now. So I can do this one now. You've just got to be that bit careful because whatever you put, oops, that colour, it will run. So we can get a colour down. So that's another one done. I think this is all dry now. Just go down here a bit. And it's just a base colour really. A universal base colour is what I'm looking for. So this one goes so just trying to get a little bit of colour in here, just if no other reason, it sets things apart and together, so you're not going to make any mistakes. And I made one there, but I'm able to get away with it, I think. And then the last one in the middle, and then I shall put this one to dry. Because this is the last of the wet. That makes any sense. This is wet on wet, so it's all going to be detailed work from now on because we've got the steps to do, we've got the little got all the steps to do. But at least everything's just got a little bit of a colour to it. and I've made a bit of a mess of the reds, but they're still okay. So I'm going to pop that up there to dry. I don't think there's any real reason to carry on with this one. I think it's done the practice of wet on wet, which is what I wanted. So part 3 will be taking all this off and then putting in the last detail. So thank you for watching.